Hi, I'm Brandon Bowers, pastor of New Life Church, located in Locust, North Carolina. And I wanted to say thanks for stopping by and checking out our YouTube channel. I hope that today's message is both encouraging and challenging to you and your walk with Christ. If you're in our area sometime, we would love to have you come check out one of our services, each and every Sunday at 8:45, 10:15, and 11:45. We'd love to have you come out. And I hope that you enjoy today's message.
Good morning. So let me just reiterate something that Tony was saying. Obviously, like I said, we're leaving this afternoon, be gone. Want you to be praying for us, just lifting us up. Now, we're going to be like 10 and a half hours ahead of you. So daylight here, we sleeping. You're sleeping, we're up doing stuff. So just keep that in mind. Not that it matters. I mean, God's awake all the time, right? But people are like, I wanted to sign up online for the whole prayer thing, but, picking a time at like 2 a.m. in the morning is really not all that convenient for me, which I get, okay? But I'm just going to make it easy for everybody. When you get up and you're headed to work, or maybe when you just get in the office, about 9 o'clock in the morning, it'll be around 7:30 in the evening for us. And about that time, usually every evening, we're either going to be in a service, preaching a service, heading to a service. Something at that time is going to be going on. So if you just want to take a moment at 9 a.m. every day for the next 2 weeks and just stop for a few seconds or a minute or two and pray, it'll make all the difference in the world. James and I were believing for over 1,000 people to come to know Christ over the next 2 weeks. And so we need you to be a part of that with us. And the other thing I want to say is that, listen, as a pastor, I'm flattered, but I know that sometimes when the pastor's away, people will play. You know what I'm saying? You'll decide to go and not do other things and not come to church, which I appreciate your confidence in my preaching. However, let me say this. The next 2 weeks, the next 2 Sundays, if you miss these 2 Sundays, I believe you'll miss 2 of the best messages that are going to be preached from this stage all year. You don't want to do that. Like I said, I'm flattered that when people say, I just want to hear you preach, thank you. But if you miss the next 2 weeks, you're going to miss 2 of the best messages all year, and you'll kick yourself for it. Next week, we're going to have Jeffrey Janes. He is the assimilation pastor from Lee Park Church in Monroe. He's going to be coming here to fill in for me next week. And then Trey Starnes, our in-motion student pastor, is going to fill the stage the following week. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So don't miss these. Don't miss these. All right, so we just kicked off this series that we're calling It's All His. We talked about last week our church, and that's how we wanted to start off the year. You're really focusing on the fact that our church is all His. And I truly believe that. Like, that's the way I think, and that's the way I plan when it comes to what we do as far as a church. This is God's church. And like I said, while I'm away, listen, nothing would please and thrill me more than to hear God did something incredible in the 2 weeks that I was gone. Like, for us to hit or to break attendance records, for people to be giving their life to Christ, nothing would thrill me more. Because, listen, it's not about me. This is His church. And I believe if it's His church, it will thrive, it will survive, it will grow with or without me. And I want that to be the mentality of us all. But not only when it comes to the church, but to our life. And that's where I want to take it today, is us to begin to think about, in our life in general, our plans, our dreams, our aspirations and goals, they're really all His. Right? We talk about what I want to do with my life, what we're going to do with our life. And when you're talking about the church, I know that you invite people and you say, why don't you come to my church? I do the same thing. We call it our church. But it's all His. In fact, one of the most famous verses in all of the Bible, God spoke through the prophet Jeremiah. In Jeremiah 29:11, He says, I know the plans that I have for you. Right? You get what that's saying? Yeah, there are plans for our life, but they're God's plans. And only He knows those plans. We can make up our own. We can intend to take life in our own direction, but God has a plan for us and for our life, and they're His plans. And not only that, but Paul, later on in the New Testament, he would write in Colossians chapter 3, verse 3, that when we come into a relationship with Jesus, he said this. In verse 3, he said, "You died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God." And when Christ, who is your life, you get that? When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with Him in glory. In other words, in Christ, once I give my life to Him, I don't exist anymore. I don't have a life anymore. It's His life. And all I want to do is live it for Him and allow Him to live life through me. And see, now words like that, people talking like that, we're used to hearing that, aren't we? We're used to hearing pastors stand and talk about, your life is God's. In Christ, you belong to Him, and His plans should be your plans and all that. And that's great. We usually don't object to things like that, do we? Until it comes time to test it. Until we run into a problem. Until we run into a moment where we have to make a difficult decision. Maybe even a painful decision. And then all of a sudden we're backing away from that. We're all like, my life is God's. God's plans for my life are my plans. I just want to live for Him. It's all His. Well, until it's not, right? Until He puts us to the test and says, okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove that claim. And usually that comes in a moment of difficult decisions, painful moments. Listen, life's full of those, right? Life is full of difficult and painful decisions. And I don't know where the theory came from that if you follow Christ, then life is going to be just sweet and awesome and good, just all the time. Listen, it's not. There's going to be painful times. There's going to be difficult times and disappointing times. As a matter of fact, as a follower of Jesus, there will be even times where God presents you with very difficult and very painful choices to make in order to test whether or not you really and truly believe that your life belongs to Him. He'll put those words to the test, and He will call us to make some really tough choices. In fact, in Luke chapter 9, this is sort of going to be our theme verse for today. Luke chapter 9, verse 23, Jesus is talking to the disciples and to a crowd around them, and He says, "If any of you want to be my followers, you must forget about yourself." Other translations say you must deny yourself. You must take up your cross each day and follow me. Now imagine for a moment if you were in that crowd. You heard Jesus say something like this. Listen, it wouldn't have been much of a surprise for you to hear Him talk about self-sacrifice, self-discipline, self-denial. In that crowd were probably mostly Jewish people. And they're accustomed to hearing and living by religious law and regulations and rituals. Much of this demanded kind of self-denial, self-sacrifice. So that wouldn't have really caught you off guard. However, that last line is the one that'll get you. That's the one that would have gotten your attention and most likely would have been a deal breaker. He says, deny yourself. Okay, I can do that. And then take up your cross. Follow me. Let's just say you had a friend that had been, he'd been following Jesus around, listening to Him preach, and he was really getting into it, right? May have even witnessed a few miracles, and your friend has been on you for several weeks now. You got to come hear this guy. This Jesus, he's saying some of the most incredible things I've ever heard anybody say. It's not like any of the teaching we've ever had our entire life. You've got to hear Him. And so you've heard, you've sensed the hype around Him. It's like, okay, I'll go check it out tonight. And as you listen to Jesus, you feel yourself just drawn into Him. Like every word that comes off of His tongue, you're just hanging on to it. And you're like all into it, man. Gosh, this guy, he's saying everything that I've been thinking, that I believe. I agree with it. Deny yourself, man. That's what I need to do. That's what I want to do. I want to bring my flesh into submission. And He says, and take up your cross. Whoa, wait a minute. You look at your friend like, he didn't say what I think he said, right? Like nobody said anything about a cross. You didn't mention a cross. I'm not too into a cross. Because you see, for them in the first century, the cross wasn't a thing of beauty as it is for us. We think about the cross as modern day followers of Jesus. And we look at it as that's the instrument by which Christ gave his life for our sin. It's by way of the cross that we are afforded redemption. It's where God displayed his love and his grace and extended mercy toward us. We adore the cross, but not so in the first century. The cross to them was a horrific reminder of the tyranny of Rome. The cross for them was an instrument of cruel torture. For many in that crowd, when he mentioned the cross, they would have immediately thought of a friend, maybe a family member, someone that they were extremely close to who died by the way of the cross. And they remember that gruesome moment when they saw their friend, they saw their family member hanging on that cross, suspended between heaven and earth, gasping for every last breath. It wasn't a thing of beauty. It wasn't a thing of attraction. It wasn't something that they would have gotten really all that excited about. Jesus says, if your life's really mine, if you really belong to me, if it's truly all mine, then you got to take up your cross, make a painful decision to follow me. Now, he wasn't saying literally that we need to go and be crucified for him. I mean, we understand that, right? Jesus wasn't saying that everybody who follows him needs to, have their or meet their end on the cross. No, he's reminding us that to follow him, and that to be obedient to him, and to live a life of complete surrender to him is often going to be painful. It's going to hurt. To carry out his desire and his will for our life is not a guaranteed pain-free experience. It's going to hurt. It's going to be very difficult. In fact, the Apostle Paul, later in his life and in his ministry, in Philippians chapter 1, he starts talking about an extremely painful decision that he had to make. He's been put in prison because of his gospel work, because of his belief and faithfulness to Christ. And there in prison, he knows his life is drawing to an end. And he says, I've got a choice to make, and he's struggling with what choice to make. On the one hand, he says, I'm eager for this life to end. I'm ready for all this to be over with. I'm tired. I'm getting older. My body can't keep up. Every time I turn around, somebody's wanting to beat me up and stone me or try to kill me. I'm ready for this life to be over because I know in that moment, eternity with God begins. But he says, on the other hand, I realize that the longer I live here, if I stay here on this earth, that just means more fruitful labor that I can do on behalf of Christ. I can continue to preach the gospel. And even though I'm in prison, I can continue to support, I can continue to encourage those who are out there on the front lines. And he's like, I'm torn, I'm struggling here. And he says in Philippians 1, verse 22, what will I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two. You ever been in a situation like that? You ever felt yourself in that kind of situation where you have a difficult decision to make, maybe even a painful decision to make, and you're torn? It's like you're being ripped apart. Maybe you have two viable, almost equal options here. I can go this way, I can go that way. I can make this choice or that choice. Both seem right. Both seem okay. But I just don't know. I don't know what the right decision is. Neither one of them promise any less pain or any less difficulty, and I don't really know which decision God would have me to make. See, God brings us many times to those kind of crossroads. It might be that we have to make a decision over a relationship. I just don't know, and I have to make a very painful choice. Am I going to continue this relationship, continue this friendship? Or am I going to abandon it? Is it time to part ways? Maybe it's a career change. Do I take this new opportunity? Do I change career paths altogether? Do I stay in the same job? I just don't know. Or if you got a sick loved one, maybe you're responsible for taking care of aging parents. It happens, right? And you have to make decisions on their behalf that concern their health and their life. Sometimes you're torn. You see, that throws in a whole new element, right? When it comes to making difficult decisions, painful decisions, sometimes we're not the only one that it affects. Sometimes it affects other people, people that we love. Sometimes those painful decisions are painful for others just as much as it is for us. But the decision still has to be made, doesn't it? Still has to be made. I think one of the most painful, most difficult decisions that I've ever had to make as a pastor is when and if to part ways with a staff member. That's not something that any pastor, any leader looks forward to, is anxious or eager for, but it happens. Over the last 9 years of leading this church, I've only had to do that twice, thank God. We don't have a lot of staff turnover. But I remember the very first time that had to happen was one of the most, probably will always rank right near the top of one of the most difficult decisions that I've ever had to make. It absolutely ripped my heart out. You see, when I came to the church here, the person that was leading the student ministry, they had already been here. They were a part of the church in that position. And when I came in, I sort of inherited them, which was okay. Like, I didn't have any qualms with that. That was totally okay. And we got along, and I thought, hey, this person is exactly who needs to be in this position, doing this, calling the shots in this ministry. And so not long after I had been there, I moved that person from a volunteer position to a part-time staff position. And then it began to be revealed over time that perhaps I had made the wrong decision. Because the relationship didn't head in the direction that I hoped that it would have. It began to deteriorate. And not only the relationship between me and that person, but that person and other people in the church began to deteriorate. And some really potentially detrimental things began to evolve. And I was like, man, what do I do? And I felt God leading me and speaking to say, it's time to make a change. It's time for you to cut ties. And that broke my heart. I thought, I don't want to do that. That's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt our church. It's going to hurt this person. It's going to hurt their family. I don't want to do that. And I fought against that. I fought against for like a year, guys. I wrestled with that decision for well over a year. And in October 2010, I had my back up against the wall. The budget was coming up for the next year. We had to make some plans and some choices and decisions about, what are we going to do in 2011? Is it going to include this staff person or any staff people and all these things? And so I felt the pressure mounting daily. And this person was also, really putting a lot of pressure on me to not only be part-time, but to be full-time. So I'm balancing things, and I feel like I'm sort of caught. Like Paul, I felt torn. And there was one particular day I'll never forget. I sensed God's Spirit speak to me, and He said, if you don't make this decision, and I knew what He was talking about, if you don't make this decision, you will regret it for many years to come. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, that scared me to death, because I knew that God meant business. But this was going to be one of the most difficult decisions that I'd ever have to make. And so I called the person into my office. One of the advisors that I've been speaking with about this situation called them in, and I had to end that relationship. And my heart sank. I felt like the worst person in the world. But I knew if I truly believe this church is all His, if I truly believe that my life and the plans that He has for me, if that's all His, then even in the painful moments, you got to make a decision that proves it. Like the old saying goes, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And God will often lead us to very difficult and painful decisions to test our claim that it's all His. My life's all His. And so I've discovered since then that particular scenario, being put in that kind of position, is not unique to me. Like, we all experience that. Maybe in a different way, maybe on a different level, but we all experience it. It's a pattern throughout the Bible. God continually brings His people, and He brings individuals to a crossroad, to a place where they must make a choice. And that choice in that moment will reveal who is in charge and what their life is all about. And I found this common theme. No advancement will take place until the choice is made. Every single time. God will bring you to a difficult and maybe even a painful decision. And your life, your ministry, your career, your marriage, whatever it is that's at stake, will not progress until you make that decision. Until you pull the trigger and do what it is He's called you to do. And see, in that moment, we will either decide that our life and all of our plans is His, we'll do the right thing, and we'll take a step toward our potential in Him, or we'll decide we're in charge, that we're going to call the shots, and we'll take a step away from God's potential and God's plan for our life. One or two things is going to happen there. And so what I want to do is with the time we have left, is just I want to show you 3 scenarios just like this in the ministry of Jesus. He has conversation and an encounter with several different people. And this first one that we're going to look at in Luke chapter 9, there's several different individuals involved here, but every single one of them tend to show or present this attitude of, God, I'm all in. Whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go, I'm in. Count me in. It's your plan, my plan. Until He puts them to the test. Luke chapter 9, verse 57 says, as they were walking along the road, a man said to Him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus replied, foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay His head. Then He said to another man, follow me. But that man replied, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. And still another said, I will follow you, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And Jesus replied, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. All right, so keep that encounter in your mind. The next one we find is in Luke chapter 18. In Luke chapter 18, Jesus has a conversation with a young man who we affectionately call the rich young ruler. So he's got a lot of money and quite possibly might be on a power trip. But he at least shows some kind of desire to live a life that pleases God. All right, so here's their situation. Luke 18, verse 18 says, a certain ruler asked him, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? Jesus answered. No one's good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not give false testimony. Honor your father and mother. All of these I've kept since I was a boy, he said. And when Jesus heard this, He said to him, you still lack one thing. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. When he heard this, he became very sad because he was a man of great wealth. And then the final scenario sort of takes us back full circle to what we read in Luke 9, where Jesus said, you got to deny yourself and pick up a cross and follow me. Well, here he doubles down on that instruction. There's this large crowd that's gathered, and they need to respond. He says in Luke 14, verse 25, large crowds were traveling with Jesus. And turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Anyone who does not carry his own cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. All right, so things getting a little tense, to say the least, right? Jesus is saying some rather controversial things. See, we tend to think that if God asks us to do something, like if He's really in on it, if God's really behind this, it's going to make sense. That's the way we think, that it's always going to make sense. If God's really behind this, if God is orchestrating these events in my life, if God has brought me to this place where I must make this decision, then the right decision must be the most natural decision. Or the right decision is going to be the decision that all of my friends and the people at church or my family members, well, they're all going to agree with. Listen, that's just not the case. That's not the case. Often God will bring us to a place where we have to make a decision that no one's going to agree with. Everybody's going to think you're absolutely insane. It's not going to seem or feel natural at all. And you'll think that God has absolutely flipped his lid. But we must make a decision that reflects it's all his, right? See, Jesus has just asked these people to do and to commit in a way that for us just seems absurd. He's testing them. He's testing their level of priority. Like, who are you really committed to? And on the surface, I'll give you this. On the surface, it looks like he's placed on them some requirements that are totally unreasonable. No doubt painful, somewhat rude, disrespectful. He says to this one guy, you can't go back and bury your father. Let the dead bury their own, let him bury himself. Right? I mean, come on. Hey, why do you want to go home and say goodbye to your mom and dad? What are you, mama's boy? I mean, they'll get the picture when you're not around. Follow me. Hey, if you really want to be my disciple, if you really want to show that you love me, you got to hate everybody else. Like, hate your mama, hate your daddy, hate your sister, hate your brother. You know what? Just go right down the list. Hate everybody, but love me. Go sell all of your possessions and give to the poor. And then like that, the last one there. Come on, people. Like, really. Pick up a cross, for crying out loud. Follow me. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Absolutely ridiculous. And we sit here, we read things like this, and we think, why did Jesus say stuff like that? Why did he make those kinds of statements? What does that mean? Most importantly, what does that mean for me? If he said that to them then, what's he saying to me now? Well, I think sometimes Jesus will say things we don't want to hear. And often he will present us with choices that we don't want to make in order to reveal three important truths. Three important truths that will either prove or disprove that life's all his. And most of the time, it's in a moment of difficult decision and painful decision. Three important truths, here's what they are. Number one, he wants to reveal to us and help us understand that everything and everyone in life must be beneath him in priority. He wants us to come to a place to where we understand that everything and everyone in our life must be beneath him in priority. See, Jesus wasn't suggesting to the guy there in Luke 9 that he should disrespect his dead father. Jesus is totally aware of the fifth commandment. Honor your father and your mother. He's God. It's his command. Right? He gets that. And he understands that to honor your father and mother doesn't simply apply when they're living. It applies even after they're gone. So that's not what he's saying. What he's pointing to is he's gauging the guy's priority. Who's more important to you? What's more important to you? If we truly believe and we truly claim that our life is all his, then what Jesus is saying is that every other relationship in your life must be obscured and be diminished by your relationship with him. He must be number one. He must be the top priority. And see, that seems to be something that we struggle with. I mean, just let me give you an example. Say you got a young person who's excited about their faith. Man, they seem to be all fired up for God. They're excited and just sort of bubbling over with enthusiasm when you start talking to them about what God's doing in their life and about the potential of what God might want to do in their life. I mean, man, they are just on fire. It's contagious until they get a date. Right? Until they get a date. They start seeing someone, they start dating someone, and then it's like, God who? Like, what do you mean, God's plan? I didn't say nothing about being called to the mission field. You must be crazy. That must be somebody else. See, everything changes. It's because their priority has shifted. The priority is no longer what does God want for me and what does he want me to do, but what can I do to please this person? What can I do to make them happy? What do they want with me or from me or for me? See, everything changes. And the priorities just moved around. It might be like someone who just got a career opportunity. You know, you got to make that decision. You're really excited about what God's done in your life. and about the way things are going for you in your relationship with Christ, and then this opportunity, like the chance of a lifetime. The job that you were hoping for, that you've been dreaming about, just sort of plop right there in your lap. And you take the job, it pays a lot more, you can live comfortably. And then all of a sudden, that person who was so excited about their faith with Christ, you start seeing them less and less at church. They seem to be not as excited about their relationship with Christ anymore because they're chasing that career, fulfilling those demands. That all of a sudden became the center and the focus of their life. And Jesus says, if your life is really all mine, then even in these moments, you must make the decision that proves it. That may or may not mean enter into that relationship. It may or may not mean to take that job. Whatever it means, it must be reflected that everything and everyone in my life is beneath Him in priority. It's not as important as my allegiance to Him. Number two, another reason that God will often confront us with difficult and painful decisions is to help us realize that everything in our life must revolve around Him in practice. Everything in my life must revolve around Him in practice. You see, this goes absolutely contradictory to everything we've ever heard, seen, been led to believe in the world that we live in today. We're totally consumed with a me mentality. This whole entitlement mentality that is rampant in our world today, it's just not only accepted as the norm, but it's as if it's expected. Like if you don't have a me attitude and an entitlement attitude, there's something wrong with you, right? It's prevalent in our society. And people come across as if, if it costs me something, if it inconveniences me in any way, not only am I not interested, but I'm offended that you would think I would be, right? I see it everywhere. But Jesus confronts this mentality head on in Luke 9 and in Luke 14, where He tells the disciples and this crowd of people, listen, if you want to follow me, you need to deny yourself. Deny yourself. That simply means to disregard your own interests. In the Greek, it literally means to act out of nature and out of character. You see, it's natural for us to be self-absorbed. It's natural for us to think about our own interests and to chase down what's going to benefit us and what's going to please us. But Jesus says, if you want to prove that your life is all mine, if it belongs to me, then even when it's difficult, you have to make the decision totally out of character, totally out of what is natural, and follow me. Follow me. You must keep my interests, my goals, my plans above everything else. You see, we can't just say that our life is all about Him and then back down from pulling the trigger when that decision to prove it is difficult. Can't be done. We got to practice what we say we believe. Number 3, Jesus says in these 3 scenarios that making difficult decisions that will prove our allegiance to Him, will reveal that everything in our life must be smaller than Him in perspective. Everything in our life must be smaller than Him in perspective. When you go back there to Luke chapter 18 when Jesus is talking to this young rich guy, what did it say was the reason? Why did he walk away sad? Luke says it was because he was a man of great wealth. Now that causes me to question a little bit. Because see, if you read the rest of the story, when this guy's walking away with his head hanging down or whatever, Jesus turns to the crowd and He says, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And I have to think, what does He mean by that? Is Jesus trying to say that rich people can't follow Him? Is Jesus trying to say rich people can't go to heaven? Is he saying that what it takes to really follow me and to show a commitment to me is that you have to choose a life of poverty, you have to sell all of your stuff, you have to give all your money away to the poor, Is that what he's saying? Is that what it takes? I doubt that. Because all through the Bible, there are plenty of people who are extremely wealthy, who live a life, show a life totally committed, totally dedicated to God. And he never asked them to give up anything. Not a dime. As a matter of fact, in all of the Bible, this is really the only incident that I can think of where he confronts a person in this way and says, sell all your stuff, give to the poor and follow me. This is the only time. So Jesus wasn't condemning wealth and commanding a life of poverty. What he was doing was simply calling for a new perspective. He wants you to see everything in life as being less valuable than him, less valuable than allegiance and surrender to him. See, the reason Jesus told him to sell his stuff and give it away, and the reason the young man walked away sad are the same. Because it was his wealth, it was his riches that stood in the way of total commitment. It was money that stood in the way of absolute surrender. And Jesus says, you can't make the claim that you're all in and that it's all mine unless it means nothing to you in comparison to me. And see, we struggle with that. We struggle with that. And until we get to a place where everything that we consider valuable is obscured by the value we place on Christ, we'll always struggle when it comes to the moment of decision. When it comes to painful moments where we're called upon to prove that commitment. It's always going to be a struggle. And so the next time, whether it's right now in your life or tomorrow morning when you get to work or sometime this week, this year, the next time you're faced with a difficult, maybe even a painful decision, and you feel like that your trust and your allegiance to Christ is being tested, then just simply remember, ask yourself these three questions. Is everything and everyone in my life beneath him in position, in priority? Does everything in my life revolve around him in practice? And is everything in my life smaller than him in priority? If you can honestly answer correctly those three questions, I believe you'll make the right decision.